Hello friends! It's good to be with you. Today I'm cooking from the How Not to Die Cookbook. It's getting to be that colder wintry season, so we are making black bean soup with quinoa and kale. So part of how does one make black bean soup hearty, for instance, or not just beans? Quinoa and kale, sweet potato, lots of other veggies happens to be the answer in this particular recipe. It's also super good for you because you get that quinoa and that kale, which we're going to talk about substitutions for that as well. But why don't we get started? So I'm again making a double batch for my family and a single batch for another family. So I have some vegetable broth already steaming. Remember, this is in place of frying with oil, or sauteing as one would call it. And we're doing that because we're just putting a little less oil in our life. If you've listened to a number of these videos, you know I am not 100% against oil. I think it adds something really tasty and beautiful. But I've gone ahead and just moved around the vegetable broth. So I buy the vegetable broth as a stock. It's like a thick paste that I stick in water. You can also make your vegetable broth or chicken broth from scratch. I just don't have time in my life right now. So you do what you have to do. That's kind of my philosophy. Like, if there is a day that I have time to make all that, but we go through so much of it, the storage would be really high too. So when I can buy a big thing from a wholesale of stock, it just takes up less space in one time. I'm doing a lot of cooking these days. So we are going with our basic beginnings to all things, onion and garlic. And then the next step of basic, celery and carrot. It's like, if you are making soup, onion, garlic, celery, carrot is the base of almost everything in so many different cultures. So the way that I like to cut my onion, you can see it here. There's a bunch of ways, but I cut it in half so as to create a flat surface for myself. I cut one way, I do a quarter turn, I cut the other way, and it allows the onion to basically be diced. So there's other ways. You could stick it in a food processor and give it a couple chops. It wouldn't be specifically uniform, and if you give it too many chops, you will have onion liquid. And if you don't give it enough chops, so I have a flat end of my onion, which allows me to cut down safely, then I can turn the onion. So with using a food processor to cut up your veggies, you want to go small batch because otherwise you're going to have to turn and turn and turn. Some of your onion or your vegetable, whatever you're making, is going to become just liquid. And if you do not enough, you're going to have such big pieces. They're not going to cook very quickly. You're going to be frustrated. So I am finishing up this little bit of onion. So if you watch other cooking shows, I bring it up because people talk about putting their vegetables in a food processor all the time. And I think that's great when you're working with small amounts. If you don't mind continuously emptying the basin, the cup, and then re-adding if you're working in large batch, then you're good to go. I'm not that big of a fan of emptying, so I would just rather be here with a cutting board doing my thing. The other thing is, I like to think about which vegetables take more time to cook, so that when I'm adding the way that we're adding right now, I'm going to make various choices about what to put in. For instance, in my opinion, carrot needs more time than, say, celery. So they often ask you to put your celery in first. I just don't do it that way. Also, just to point out, this recipe calls for 1 carrot per batch. That would mean I would have 3 carrots. But as you can see here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 carrots. Why? Because my opinion is, why not use enough vegetable? Like, if there's one way that I can often get my kids to eat vegetables, it's when they're nice and soft in a flavorful soup. So I am not going to skimp on the veggies. No one ever died from eating too many veggies. Quite the opposite. So I add extra. This single batch, I'm going to add 3. It also gives your soup a little bit of bulk, right? And in my opinion, I want a chunkier soup if that's going to be my main dish. I don't want my soup to be like a puree. I'm never going to make a bisque if it's going to be my main dish. Or like, unless I had a large lunch, maybe a bisque and a bread. But to this day, I've never had a reason to want a bisque. These are a little thicker, so before I was cutting 2 at a time side by side, or sorry, 3 at a time. Now I've got 2 here. And I'm just doing this rocking motion to get through the whole carrot. I'm not looking at you because I value having fingers and I cut myself all the time. So I try to let my body heal every once in a while before I cut it again. Those are gonna fly over to the farther pot. And I'm gonna keep going. This one's a little short because our little one was like, ooh, let me try carrot. And I was like, great, maybe we're gonna eat carrots. And then he was like, yuck. And that went in the trash and I ate the remainder of it. So someday, everyone in our house. The great thing about carrot though, the majority of the kids in our house will eat them. They're a sweet vegetable. So a lot of people will say, even if they don't like vegetables, that they like carrots. It's really funny. Also, there's not a lot of texture to them, but that sweetness means that for people who are really sensitive to bitter, the carrot can be one of the best. However, not if it's super thick. If it's super thick, you're going to have a woodier taste, and then it will be kind of bitter. These are kind of nice. They're right in the middle, and they came from like a 10-pound bag. So that's the other thing about vegetables. If I know that it's wintertime and we're going to be making a ton of soups, I'm going to buy a 10-pound bag of carrots. They last like a month. They last so long. If it's summer and maybe I just know I'm not using a lot of carrot, I might buy the 2-pound bag. But you get a super skinny carrot, so you're going to basically need the whole stupid 10-pound bag if you're cooking. So I'm just giving these a quick stir so that my carrots are wet. And I'm going to turn this burner up a little. Now I'm going to move to my sweet potato because I think even that is going to need, no, I lied. I'm going to do my celery. So once again, the celery here calls for 1 stalk. I'm going to do 4. When I make a chili, I cut up an entire stalk of celery and throw it in. Celery has like no calories once you eat it, right? It just adds texture and flavor to your soup. So there's no reason to skimp on it. Plus, who wants to eat plain celery? I know somebody does, but it certainly is not me. I don't want to eat plain celery. So I have a friend actually who even de-strings it as she eats it, which is just so much work. I don't want to do it. So if I'm eating celery sticks, I have to cut them really thin. But celery is easy to cut through. So I can take a big batch like this and just go ahead with that rocking motion, up, down. And you can make your way through a bunch of celery so fast. It takes almost no time at all. And again, it just flavors your soup, gives it a little bit of texture. It gets really soft in the broth. So you're not going to be adding too much. But in terms of bulk, again, I want my soup to be bulky. I want it to be hearty. I want our family to feel full when they're done, to feel satisfied. So once again, I want to give these a good turn in the pan, make sure that they're part of the cooking process. If you were watching a cooking show, perhaps these would already be chopped up and they would throw it all in and let it cook for 5 minutes. That's not my reality when I'm cooking every day. I can't even imagine how that would look. So I'm sort of letting a lot of cooking process happen while I do other things. So sweet potato. The recipe calls for 1 sweet potato. This is a weird one. It's really round. In fact, this is one of those things, I buy it at wholesale, and you get what you get. So it's like sometimes the skins are so weird or cratery. It's like the moon. But this is going to get really soft when you put it in there. And so I'm going to put these in dice fashion. If I wasn't cooking for little ones, I might do a little less with the dicing. I might have bigger chunks than these even, but it's really up to you. It's whatever size. I think you're shooting for something that fits in your mouth. That's kind of the bottom line. And I'm gonna, because my pot that's getting a double batch is gonna need more time to cook, I'm gonna make sure that that one gets it first. And keep in mind, as you're watching me here, right, I'm making a triple batch. So everything I do is taking 3 times as long as if you were making just one batch. But if you're like me, I think the reality is every time I come to the kitchen, I want to make it worth it, right? So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to make a lot of food all at once so that the time that I spent there means less time later. So that when I come back, I'm just heating and throwing things into containers and sending people out the door and saying, have a great day. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for when I come into the kitchen. So I am going to, with these, create a nice flat edge for myself and then throw the sweet potato in because it's a round object. I don't want to hurt myself. Once again, you're doing a lot of cutting. The more cutting you do, the more opportunity to hurt yourself. So you want to be super diligent with how you're utilizing that knife. But essentially, I cut in half, I make some strips, I do a quarter turn, I cut in half again. And that gets me where I want to go. And again, you see me, if the recipe called for 1 sweet potato, then I should have had 3 sweet potatoes. I have 4. Once again, same idea there. I just want to get enough bulk and heft. I want it to have been worth making that pot of soup. I don't want to get done and be like, oh, there's not much here. Now I'm going to need to do something else. Have bread and salad or chips or whatever. We might still want some of those things just for like a little something with the meal. But some nights the soup is enough and that kind of justifies the time that you spent with it. Then the next day when it becomes lunch, it gets served with maybe some chips and some fruit. And, you know, I'm just heating it in the microwave, putting it in a nice thermos and saying, have a great day, everybody. And they've got a super healthy meal that's not just peanut butter and jelly. We do peanut butter and jelly too. But every day, I think that became the sadness for me as a kid. It's like, I just don't want to eat the exact same thing every day. And I was a kid. So kind of applying that to my grown-up life as well. I'm on my last sweet potato here. This one's super big. So flip that one up. Create some nice thin wedges, right? So that I can, and because this one is so big, I'm going to cut it long. I'm going to cut it short so that they're actual diced pieces. And that'll help everything cook uniform. You're always looking for that to be a uniform existence in the pot. Otherwise, you're going to have stuff that's really mushy and stuff that's really crunchy. Later on, this is going to cook up for 30 minutes because you're going to add the quinoa. And so all these veggies are going to have plenty of time to cook, in case you wondered. But sweet potato is such a nice addition. It's beautiful in color. It's super rich in nutrients, more so than a white potato. So anytime you're looking to add a little nutrients, subbing in sweet potato for white potato is a totally great idea. But just for variety, you're not going to always want sweet potato. So again, give this a turn in the pan so that everything is getting cooked. I can see, I don't know if you can see, but those onions are already getting soft. My carrot is starting to get soft. I did this sweet potato last because sort of like if I was boiling potatoes for mashed potatoes, 10 minutes those things are going to be ready, and we're going to be cooking this for 30 minutes still. Turn my sweet potatoes in this pan. Same thing here. I can see that things are cooking up really nice, and we're almost done with all those roots. We have garlic left. I don't like this particular cut, so fix that. Okay, so garlic. I have shown you a couple of ways to get the skin off of a garlic. Today what I did was actually pressed down using the blunt end of the knife and cracked off the peel that way. So this particular recipe calls for 2 cloves of garlic. I'm gonna pretty much stick to that. I think it ended up, because I'm doing this whole batch, we were so close to finishing a bulb, I went ahead and finished the whole bulb. So it's close to 2 cloves of garlic, but it'll be a little bit extra. And that's fine, because garlic never hurt anybody. I often wonder if I should just use a potato ricer to crush my garlic, because it's so much garlic when I cook. But for now, I've got my handy dandy old school garlic presser here. Garlic is kind of sticky, so you've got that to contend with. I'm kind of short, so when I use a garlic press, I often have to stand on my tiptoes so I don't burn myself on the edges. Hazards of the job. But garlic is lovely. It brings such a nice flavor to food. So I embrace the stickiness. I embrace the standing on my tiptoes. The whole of it, to get that wonderful, beautiful flavor into the food. But just to say, I've said it before, if you don't have time, garlic powder, right? Add a couple teaspoons of garlic powder and move on with your day. If I had a newborn in the house, you can be sure that I'd be thinking of that kind of thing. Similar, you could use a frozen, pre-done garlic, or you could chop up a bunch of garlic in a food processor, but it does start to go bad, so you kind of have to keep an eye on that. So that's the garlic. Let me go ahead and set this in the sink and rinse my hands because it is so sticky. And then I just want to be sure to do a turn in the bowl with both of these to incorporate that garlic. And this is great. It's ready for the next step. Turning that in so the garlic is incorporated, not all in one place. Everything gets a little bit of that flavor. Yum. And you can see, like, it's like a quarter pot of vegetables in there, which is wonderful. Okay, so hi, welcome back. Now that we've done that part, the next part is to add our spices, our quinoa, our beans, our tomato, and our kale, and some extra water. So here's the thing. This calls for a bay leaf. For years, I had a ginormous bay leaf dried that I would add stuff to, and then you gotta pull the bay leaf out. I quit using bay leaf, so we're not gonna have it in this recipe because I didn't like pulling it out. But if you have bay leaf, you're welcome to do it, a bay leaf in each one. After that, it's a 1/3 cup of quinoa. So again, I buy my quinoa in bulk because we use so much of everything, and it doesn't really go bad quickly. I have measuring cups close at hand all the time. It's a 1/3 cup, so this one will get a double batch. And a 1/3 cup won't seem like much, but it's small and it cooks up. So as you're adding, don't worry about how small it looks. It'll cook up, it'll be in there. It is 2 cans or 3 cups of black beans per batch. So I've got, let me make sure I pull all those out, make sure that my friends get all their beans. And this one, just to keep them separate, I had rinsed and left them in the colander. So that is a ton of black beans. This is like 4 cans. Then it's 1 can of tomato, undrained. These are diced tomatoes. It's gonna add some really great flavor. Tomatoes so tasty. I love it. And obviously this other one's gonna get 2 because it's a double batch. So that's in there. All of our spices. So starting at the bottom, we have a savory spice blend. Then we have some cumin, some oregano, salt, and pepper. It's like a teaspoon of cumin, 2 teaspoons of the savory spice blend, which comes at the front of his How Not to Die cookbook. Essentially, it's like a little bit of everything. But that's going to add a lot. And he does not do salt, so I have learned my family's going to enjoy the food better if I add salt. And then let me grab, have you come with me because you've been looking at those pots for a while. So the remainder of the water is 3 cups of broth. And I'll have to take a look because I added all those extra vegetables. So you're going to want enough broth, enough water in there to cover everything. So I'll make a decision in a minute. But, oh, you're looking at the corner. This is where in high-tech world you would have multiple cameras, but I don't. So here's 4. I have to come over. You can keep an eye on those for me. Make sure that they don't go anywhere. I find that when I'm cooking, I usually end up needing about 12 cups of water. So I'm going to do 8 cups automatically in there. And I think here, this is just covering, but let me give it another 2 cups because we're going to add kale. Actually, I'm going to do 3 cups because we're going to add kale to this too. And that other one, I'm going to add another. So you see, it's not an exact science, right? They created a recipe, I played with it, and then the result of me playing with it is making sure that I have enough water to cover everything. Also, you're going to want a broth. So that that quinoa basically disappears right now all over the place because it's so tiny, you just can't see it. Don't worry though, it'll become apparent in your actual meal because it's going to cook up and you'll just want to make sure it's dispersed well throughout. So that comes around, you start to see how quickly it comes together after you get all those vegetables in there. And just to make sure I'm on track, so we've added our bay leaf, our quinoa, our beans, our tomatoes, our spices, the water, and we want to bring it up to a boil. So this burner I have is a rapid boil. I have to be careful with this one because it gets so hot. This one is not so bad. So while we're waiting for that to come up to a boil, let me just chat with you for a little bit about the kale. So you can buy your kale in bunches. I bought this one partially cut up already. And then I went through and I looked for big, thick stem pieces because they don't cook well, they don't eat well. As a grown-up, I probably would just eat it. But I have kids in the house that are texture sensitive. I'm trying to get vegetables into their world, not kill them, right? So I make sure that all those big pieces are off and I make it even smaller than it comes. If you wanted to make this even, see how small that is? It'll cook down really nice, especially because it's going to cook for 30 minutes. If you wanted to make this even easier for your people, spinach, baby spinach, would be a great way to do that. You wouldn't have to do all that extra prep work. If you want to make this even faster, frozen. So you could buy pre-chopped spinach or kale, dump it in at the last second even because it's already cooked. So it's really up to you how you want to do it. Chefs often say if you can buy fresh, why not? Obviously there are reasons, like you have a newborn baby or a deadline or you're just generally tired. You know, do what you need to do. That's the big thing there. In any case, this calls for 3 cups of kale and I promise you this is more than that. So if I were to just measure this out, and when you're doing greens, like really stuff it. Like nobody loses from eating a lot of greens, but there's 1 cup, right? Which then I have to work really hard to pull it out because I stuffed it. But greens, it's like air, so, and they cook down a lot. So there's a 2nd cup, and I'm being very generous with what a cup really equals. You can do that because it's good for you. I've stuffed it again, dropped a little on the floor. Continue, and so let me show you this pot, right? It's right up to the top. Now with this other one, that would be 6 cups, which is just a ton of fun. Who doesn't want to play around measuring cups of kale that way? Let me pull you over so you can see. Want to see our Halloween candy? There it is. So you can shake on that all day. It doesn't make any difference. So, you know, I go to the store. I think I bought a 16-ounce bag of chopped kale. If it's already cooked, you would find you probably would just throw in 1 bag for 1 batch and 2 bags. I'm not going to measure. I think just based on what happened there, this next one would equal 3 cups roughly. A little extra for my friends, a little extra here, a little extra there. Boom, bada bing, empty. So once you're to this point, you're basically done. I need this to come to a boil, but then I'm going to bring it down to a simmer. I think I cover it. Let me check. Yep. You cover and you cook 30 minutes until the vegetables are tender. So at that point, you're done. You can go do your dishes, do your laundry, write a report, watch TV, take a shower, as long as it really truly is on low and simmering. Be sure of that. You don't have to sit there and babysit it. It's a stew. It's really just melding its flavors together at that point. So bringing it around. And the great thing about kale is it's so hearty. So that's why it can cook in here for the full 30 minutes. It's not going to just fall apart or anything like that. And because it's going to cook for 30 minutes, it's going to get softer, which will make it easier for baby mouths to start to kind of get used to that kind of a flavor. When I was a kid, I don't think we had spinach in a can, and then I think my first foray into spinach was like something Alfredo at the Olive Garden. And even then, even just eating some spinach with a really creamy sauce was just disgusting. So I didn't like tomatoes in sandwiches. I didn't like zucchini at all. So our palates really do develop the more that we try things. And I continue, right? Like, I eat squash and I'm enjoying it with increasing measure, but it's not my favorite. Something similar would be true of eggplant. So see, that's all nice and incorporated. And as that's the case, it's starting to get warmer, which is great. You can start to see the bubbles, so it's really quite ready to start to boil. So you're almost there. And you can kind of get a sense of what this will look like once it's done, right? Like, it's going to basically look like this, except for your quinoa is going to be bigger. And that gives you a really beautiful broth, a really beautiful hearty soup. And if it's cold out, so much the better. If you happen to make it and global warming is taking over and it's 70 degrees that day, what are you going to do? I plan my meals in advance, so that kind of thing is totally possible. But that's it after that. They showed us a beautiful picture of all the separate ingredients. I give you a more final picture. Also, just one more note, this recipe particularly calls for a red kale. There is no such thing in my supermarket, so green kale it is. But don't let that kind of thing bother you. So once it's here, you can turn it to low, cover them up, let them simmer for 30 minutes. When you're done, they can sit there until you're ready to eat. They could go in the fridge. They could go all sorts of places to make life easier for you. So that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad that we could make this together, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.